Thank you all for making the effort to come, whether you took a scooter from Ubud or you rushed on the subway to get home in time. Probably where you are in the subway, it's cold, it's dark. I recognize there are plenty of other opportunities for you. You can be anywhere with your precious human life and your precious mind stream and your precious resources. So the fact that you decided to join this adventure with me, it's not lost on me. I have gratitude for your choices and where you put them. It's nice to see so many familiar faces and also some new ones. And we have a lot of work to do, obviously, because of the state of the planet and the state of each of our individual minds. So I imagine that the opportunity to consciously undergo rebirth is the central unifying theme for our work together, both personally and collectively. I'm imagining since the portals opened January 10, 2020, ushering in the pandemic, a series of events have befallen us collectively and you individually that has sent you far and away from whatever trajectory you were once on. And while many of our peers, colleagues, friends, fellow humans have been holding their breath, waiting to go back to how it used to be, my assumption that you recognize we're never going back. We're going through. We're going through a great tumult and sea change, and on the other side awaits a new world. And individually, you're all on your own personal journeys at the same time. Whoever you once were, whatever mindsets, whatever behaviors, whatever karmic tendencies, whatever traumatic imprints, they are slowly becoming unearthed so that they can be processed, so that there can be renewal. And so at the time that there's a great cataclysm and a great crisis, there's also the opportunity for renewal. They come together. So the way that I see the 12 weeks that we'll be spending together is to open to crisis, open to the shadow, open to the challenge, open to the difficulty. Surrender what we've been holding on to. Process what needs to be seen and integrated and rebuild through vision, through vibration, and through connection. So part of the opportunity that we have together is on a mundane level. We get to study, we get to have discussions, we get to meditate a little bit. We get to do some practices. We have some assignments, some readings. All of those will occupy sort of the conventional level. But all of it's pointing to something much deeper, which is the ultimate level, which is the sense of oneness or wholeness or emptiness, openness, possibility. And that place within us is calling us home. That place within us is pregnant with potential. It's ready to create. If we stay at the surface level, the level of ideas, the level of separation, the level of our own individual lives, we can make some progress, especially if we've clarified some of the things that are getting in our way. No problem staying at that level. No problem being an individual. No problem working on your own unique histories. No problem. Necessary. But the real solution, the more pervasive solution, happens at a deep level where there is no personal identity. In fact, there is no trauma to heal there. There's no obstacle there. That place inside of us we have often outsourced. We've seen the great teachers, the great lamas. We've revered them. We've recognized they've had some sort of illumination. But the time has come for each of us to feel that we have direct access. That is one of the major archetypes of the epoch we are heading into. It's on our shoulders, the sense of responsibility to reconstruct our lives. It can't be outsourced to leadership. It can't be outsourced to the guru. It can't even be outsourced to our intelligence. Look at AI. We're going to have absolutely puny intelligence by comparison in the coming years. Insignificant intelligence. The one thing that AI will never have is the natural openness, clarity, luminosity of consciousness. And that each of us has to tap, has to taste, has to make the center of our endeavor. And that's what we're bringing home to our individual lives. That's the boon, the elixir that we bring to our individual lives, to our family life, to our work life, to the reconstruction of our societies, to the reconstruction of the planet. That will make all the difference. And so this is a mythological journey. It's a spiritual journey. It's a spiritual pilgrimage. And just like many of you have actually been on pilgrimage with Geshe Tenzin Zopa and myself, or on your own, you know there are bumps, there are bruises, there are unforeseen eddies that drag us into a different trajectory. That's going to happen in 12 weeks. Very likely some of you won't be able to make it from Ubud. There. It's very likely you won't be able to make it to class. It's very likely something will come up. So just do your best. Think about 3 months of your life. Focused. Watching your mind. Watching what comes up. Working with what comes up. Trying to stay the course. Trying to come back if you get pulled away. Something grabs your attention. Something feels heavy. Something feels more consequential, more immediate. Try to make your intention now that you'll finish the course. You'll finish the work that we set out to do together. We're going to go through 3 disciplines. Today we'll start the mythology. In a month from now, we'll start the psychology of Jung. And in 2 months, we'll start the tantras. And I have no special gift or talent or insight to give you. So one of the major themes of decentralization that we're heading into is that it's on you. It's on you. Your own wisdom is your teacher. And it's your journey. So there's no spoon feeding or hand holding. Somebody asked me the other day, what are the page numbers for your syllabus for your reading? It's not going to happen that way. There are no page numbers. I may go off course in one of these classes. You may go off course in one of these classes. There's no little bite-sized pieces to digest. The material that we covered together in the class is just a access point. It's the tip of the iceberg. The main work happens off the chat or off the Zoom. What happens in your everyday? What happens in the weeks between? Or what happens when you're just out there working with your kids, driving to school, having conversations? That's where the work will take place. And you have to trust yourself, and I trust all of you, that you can guide your own journey. You are the guide of your own journey. In fact, it's not just your intelligence, it's your inner Tara that we've just evoked is already guiding. And so it's an exercise in trust and devotion to your own inner intuition that is the main thrust of the entire program. Can you listen? Can you be dutiful student to your own intuition? Can you serve your own inner guru? Even if it takes you off some of the syllabus and the material, don't worry, go with it. Like, for example, I've made a quick choice to include my book in the first month. It's the unedited, unpublished. I'm going to ask each of you to not share it. Don't post it. Don't share it with a spouse. Don't give it away. It's for you. It's part of what brought me here in the last few years. It brings together these three disciplines. All the maps are in there, designed beautifully by Karen, and was very lovely put together by Putu, who's also responsible for designing all the back end. Putu is a great scholar of Tantra, and he happens to be a really skilled course creator. So thank you to Putu for getting us here. Thank you to Karen for getting us here. Thank you to Jiro Ning for opening the portals. Thank you to Geshe Tenzin Zopa for all his inspiration. Thank you to each one of you and your own green Taras for motivating you to take this journey. You start reading my book, and if it's not for you, you chuck it. You read Joseph Campbell. If Joseph Campbell's not for you, you look for a mythology. You don't know which mythology to choose, you go walking in the stacks of the old libraries. You remember the ones with the actual bound books? You go for a pilgrimage into the stacks in New York City, and you find, by synchronicity, the myth that finds you. And at first, you have no idea what it's about. And by the time you finish reading it, you understand exactly what it's all about. And so this is kind of the nature of this course. And some of you were already part of the Return with the Elixir that we did in 2020 or 2019. Similarly, things will appear. Your dreams, synchronicities, artworks. Follow these cues of the right brain, of the soul whispering. Let them lead you. Stay with them if it's not clear. It's not always clear. It's not always straightforward. It takes time to decipher. You might have to tolerate some ambiguity and some frustration, but keep following the leads. So the things that I'm offering on the syllabus and the readings, they're just starting points. And you have to just be brutally honest in following your own path. So that's a little bit of the nature of the pilgrimage we're about to take. Now I want to just get specifically into the thematic of the next month. So we have to talk about mythology. Before we talk about mythology, it may make sense to talk about astrology. Not that it's my primary discipline, but there is something about the stars operating above us that have an influence. And I recommend that you listen to the podcast I just released with master astrologer Lynn Bell, who's been guiding my family and many of my friends for many years now. We are amidst a great sea change between two ages. These ages last somewhere on order of 2,150 years each. We are at the tail end of one and at the dawning of another. And at that sea change, every single symptom that we can see in the collective field is directly related to this global or cosmic dance. The society that we've become familiar with is sunsetting. The structures and the institutions are corrosive. They're on their last leg like a deck of cards like sand castles at the shoreline. They're on their last leg. We can try patching them up for a few more years. We can try kicking the can down the road. We can try pumping the financial system, the economic system with fiat currency. Eventually, all of these things will collapse. Not in some big, dramatic, one-day cataclysm, but as John Michael Greer likes to say, it's called a slow descent. It's a slow boil, almost imperceptible. And we'll be messaged and bombarded by messages that everything is okay, let's keep the status quo. But actually, we want it to once and for all dissolve. This is mirrored in our tantric visualization. The sand mandala at the tail end is swept away so that it can make room for the pregnancy of a new world. So the civil unrest, the banking collapse, the leadership that's absolutely inept, where there's no clear choice anymore to look up to. The depravity of morality, the wars are all a symptom of a slow decline. But as I remarked in my conversation with Lynn Bell, there's a strategic opportunity in the decline. So if this is really key, I'd like you to all take a moment and in your own mind, select one word that reflects your impression of what you're seeing and experiencing in the world. So right here in Bali, what you see in Bali, where you are in New York City, where you are in LA, where you are in Sydney, looking out, the perception that you have, try to catalyze, try to distill into one word. I'm actually curious. Anybody here got one word? I'm launching the chat. How about you guys in the chat? Anybody? What is it? Transformation?
Blessed.
Crossroads. I'm seeing unreal, despair, chaos, loss, shedding, shameful, emptiness, divisive, shit show. Okay, we got shit show, life unfolding, batshit bravery. Okay, blessed, confusion, starting anew, set up. Okay, so this is an example of emptiness because everybody, we share the field, and yet everybody is struck with their own perspective on it. And actually, all these adjectives describe the one field that we share, but from different points of view and at different times. You yourself, I don't know about you, I can confess that I can go for the shit show once in a while. And I can get, it's part of our everyday conversation with my friends here in Bali, that if you look too closely, sometimes you can get choked up, or you can get paralyzed, or you can get consumed. Consumed with what exactly? It's the fear channel. It's the vibration of groundlessness, that everything, there's no security anymore. There's no sure bet anymore. There's no ground under our feet anymore. That many of us have already crossed 40, the 40-year-old the threshold. So we once knew a life where you could plan 10 years out. You knew what to expect. The generation before us, they look at us thinking like, how come you've moved 6 times? Actually, in Bali, we move more than 6 times in a life. We move 6 times in a year. You don't want to move to Bali, guys. Don't move to Bali right now. Phil's not here, but I think Phil in the last 2 years has moved 18 times. 18 times. That's more than changing your underwear. My point is this, is that at any one given moment looking out there or turning it back and looking at yourself, there are days where you have a vantage point on your open possibility. You feel inspired. You feel that things can change. Then there are times where you become contracted. You're filled with fear. You're filled with trepidation. You're filled with angst. You become fixated. Same so you turn it around on the mirror out there. You get a glimpse of one angle of reality. It feels helpless. You have kids. You worry about their future. You catch another slight of the fractal reality and you see the sprouting of possibility and of hope. People doing incredible things like Matthew and Akiko starting a regenerative farm, very modest, very humble, very small footprint, very local and humble at heart. Learning the language so that you can be embedded in the culture, shedding all the bullshit, all the accumulated stuff, living light, living with the air sign that we've entered into for the next 200 years, fluid and dynamic. The last 200 years were dominated by the earth sign, which is heavy, big houses. It's bloody, what are those big trucks? There used to be military trucks, then everybody in LA started getting one. What are those called? What are they called? Hummers. Hummers. A Hummer is a perfect thing. It's a perfect symbol, right? Why the hell would you need to travel in a guzzling tank with rubber wheels? But yes, so the point is when I was talking with Lynn, it became really clear in this sea change, depending on the angle and depending on the state of mind, there will be a relationship with the universe. She describes it so beautifully. Can you open to a relationship with the universe that is based on intimacy? What is the moment presenting? Can you be open to what the moment is presenting? And sometimes because the planets have their own objective personality, there's something unique about every moment based on your chart and the star and the alignment with the stars at any given moment. There's something very unique about that constellation meeting. And she was describing it as an opportunity to be in intimacy and to work with what's presenting itself. And sometimes what presents itself is actually a challenge. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes it is death. Sometimes it is disillusion. Sometimes it is hubris, narcissism. Sometimes it's destruction. All the adjectives that you already shared, there is a small truth about all of them, but they're all housed within the greater emptiness. The field of possibility contains all of those microscopic individual moments. When we meet this moment of destruction, when we meet that moment of despair, when we have that moment of helplessness, or let's look at some of the more let's look at the United States and what's migrating west to Europe, the division, for example, the absolute insane polarization. I mean, I don't know about you, how many of you are absolutely fatigued by that division? And it feels like post George Floyd, it just went on steroids. It went so much on steroids that there was a time 20 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, where you could sit at a table with somebody with a different political orientation than you and still hold a conversation. And that can't happen anymore. It rarely happens anymore. So that's what's presenting itself. Then what's the spiritual opportunity? How do you meet that moment? But this is the microscopic alchemy of that moment. Is what is the universe asking us? What is the universe presenting for us, for our growth in the division? What is pregnant within the division? Anybody? You could put it this way, what's missing from the division? Growth?
Understanding.
Unity. By definition. By definition. The deepening of the division is a cry from the collective soul for unity. It doesn't sound that way when it hits our ears. But this is the mythological, mythopoetic, third eye perspective. Is that the things that we see out there that stir our emotions and hijack our amygdala and send us off into paralysis, if we see them through the third eye, it's actually, and we listen really carefully, underneath the vibration of fear, there is a deeper calling. And in that deeper calling, there's actually a signature of the new epoch that is arising. What I mean by that is the Aquarian age that's incoming is presenting itself with a particular kind of constellation, a signature. And if you look carefully at the Piscean age as it declines, and you see things like division, the Aquarian age is calling for unity. I actually call these the 4Ds. I'm not saying that this encapsulates everything about this transition, but it's just a way that I've begun to hold information, store information, set a tab, put a pin in it. The first one is this division. The second one is the centralization that actually is calling for decentralization. The third one that we're looking at is the dignity, the lost humanity is being called. So when you look at things like war, you think, how have we gotten so far away from our humanity? And you're just teetering on the edge of despair. With the third eye of recognition, you can see actually what that's doing is it's calling from the deepest part of our soul to remind ourselves of our common humanity. When you see the division, you listen to the collective soul and you hear the voice calling for unity. The pyramid structures, the pyramid schemes of our governments that only profit the few. The call of the soul is for peer-to-peer decentralization, cutting out the middlemen and letting go of our disenfranchised, outsourced authority. So, for example, when we evoke the presence of Tara, what we're doing is we're calling in the feminine. Why do we need the feminine? Because the masculine has become overrun. So do we destroy the masculine? Do we castrate the masculine? Well, we know where that comes. It comes to another kind of imbalance. What we do is we integrate. It's calling for integration. It's not calling for a holy war against the masculine. And we'll swing from 200 years of pendulum between masculine and feminine, not finding the balance between the two. So there's the decentralization. There's what's called diversity within unity. There's the dignity. And there's one more that'll come to me in a second. The diversity in the diversity and unity is something that came upon my awareness in the recent pilgrimage to Java. There is actually a slogan here in Indonesia that's very old. It's ancient. It is precisely now become the motto for the government, the modern government of Indonesia, which is diversity within unity. And some 1,000 islands or more of the archipelago of Indonesia. Does anyone know how many islands it is? How many? It's only 700? It's more than that, no? Thousands of islands of Indonesia. It's a good metaphor. You have all these discrete sub-languages, you have different worldviews, you have tribal organizations, you have local governments. For example, Bali is much different than Sumatra is different from Java. But there's something that unifies them all. And this is, I think, where we've gone wrong. You need both. Both need to be integrated. What does the world look like when you don't honor diversity? But then also, what does the world look like when you champion diversity but don't have unity? You can find examples. The rise of nationalism is an example. You know, the building of borders, the dispelling of foreigners, the challenge against people who are divergent in their sexual orientation, until you have a monolithic culture. What happens is there's a great repression of expression, and that has a shadow, and in the shadow there is a backlash. But there's an equal and opposite effect on the other side, where you champion all these individual needs, all these individual groups, all the marginalized groups that are looking for validation, recognition, acceptance. That part is good. But then it can just fragment and fractal until you get down to a common denominator of just one individual who wants to be seen with their particular kinds of idiosyncrasies. And there's no longer any sense of commonality. So what I'm talking about is painting the picture of these extremes, and our job is to look at the present moment, see what is being presented at a superficial level, but see if we can dig deep and ascertain the possibility that is pregnant there, and orient and align ourselves to that new reality. Now that's not a one-day project. I'll give you a very common experience I have with. I mean, for example, we're now batching together a community here, but just in the most mundane sense, people coming together for a common project of 12 weeks. I'm not interested in you liking each other. I don't care if you're friends or not. That's not important. I don't care about that. What I really care about is that you both feel free to express your individual difference, but yet you have the receptivity to really hear somebody else's point of view, especially when it's different from yours, and especially when you don't like it. And that's something that I think when we were doing this project together in the CSP several years ago now, there was too much championing your own cause and not enough listening to people that were different. So I feel like it's a very strong missed opportunity.
Absolutely.
Now, what about the outliers? What about the extreme people that don't have any interest in hearing, sharing, and at least respectfully disagreeing? Don't worry about them. They're actually the minority. They have big microphones, and they probably have a lot of financial resources backing them. But don't worry about the outliers. Engage with people
I don't like this.
who represent different points of view. Try to find that common respect. Try to embody the principle of dignity that you hope to see in the world in your one-to-one interaction with somebody who presents with some point of view that's slightly different than yours, or even dramatically different than yours. Otherwise, my fear is where does Where does reconciliation come from? If it can't come from people who sign up for a course like this and yet sit across from someone who has a different point of view and you can't tolerate them.
What are you talking about?
And you shut down the conversation because they're unwilling to agree with you.
What are you
I
talking
don't all have
about?
to agree right now about the energy crisis and how to resolve it with Tesla cars right now. We don't have to do that. We can have constructive debates. It's all open.
About?
And if you haven't noticed in the last few years, the science is all fucked up. What do I mean by that? You get a group of people that have established science of the vaccination work, well, what do you have on the other side? And then people get all upset. But no, it's true. If you've done any research in your life, you might not be willing to admit it now, but if you've done any research and been part of any academic study, the science is, not foolproof. It's tricky. We can't, Geshe Tenzin Zopo said this beautifully. We can't outsource not even the authority of science is worthy of outsourcing our empowerment. Science is okay, it's good, it has some good benefits, no doubt. We shouldn't jettison it. But this idea of, statistically this, the research says this. The more and more you scratch at that, the more and more variables become apparent to us. That there are all kinds of unscrupulous things that go into science. There are lobbyists, there are monies, there are agendas. There's definitely corruption that's rife across this planet. So this is the fourth D. The fourth D of what's coming in the pike, down the road for us. Amidst the swirl of disinformation, misinformation, and information overload is this thing called discernment. How many of you get tired and weary by the bombardment of information? And you don't know where you are. And there's, as I had this moment with Lynn in agreement where you don't know what to trust and you don't know what's real. And now they've got AI at work busily creating deepfake, fake news, propaganda, surreptitious agenda. We have to be really careful. You're just scrolling and you see something and boom, you're caught in a moment. Hijacked, amygdala hijacked. You're ready to react. Somebody's pulling the strings on that. Somebody's pulling the string. I can't tell you who it is. But I know someone designed that for that particular purpose. I know these gadgets have been designed to manipulate our dopamine reinforcement contingencies and enslave our attention. There's worse stuff coming. Jung knew it. In one of his last books, Aeon, he was very clear that the first 500-year period of the Aquarian Age, first 500-year period is like the opening act of the 2,150-year epoch. He predicted it was coming around now. When I talked to Lynn Bell, astrologers can't pinpoint the exact transition time of the Aquarian Age. It's not actually important. It's not actually important. There is no one day where we change. It's a slow transition. And for the first 500 years of a new civilization, Jung was actually really concerned, let's put it that way. Actually, more so, he was horrified. Why was he horrified? Because he knew the technology that we would have, the technological prowess and capability that we have, far exceeds our moral compass. And that means technology can be used in all kinds of very manipulative, self-serving, self-aggrandizing ways, including rigging an election or stealing an election, including creating the causes and conditions for war, including manipulating social media so that people like you and I get stirred up to actually support a cause that morally we don't actually agree with. And so we have become divided against ourselves, not ourselves out there, but even ourselves within. Again, that is what's presenting itself in the moment if we're open to receiving the message from the universe. What is it calling for? Discernment. Don't believe every word you hear. Don't believe every word you read. Don't believe these technologies are so incredible. The power of images. The power of images, so compelling. I think we have to build in a filter system that gives us just a small little gap to question everything. Question everything. And if that means that you feel ungrounded because you're out floating in the wind without some sense of certainty, we have to also tolerate that window there. I just don't know. I just don't know. I'm reading this, I'm reading that, I saw this, I saw that, I went to the root source there, and I still don't know. If we can tolerate that, then we can be just one of those people that isn't just getting hooked by the algorithm, hooked by the manipulated tactic, hooked by the matrix, hooked by the fear channel. If we can do that, this is where creating a alternative culture becomes important. It doesn't just exist out there. It's created by living beings who are on a spiritual journey, who make contracts with each other to support each other in that ambiguity. Holding conversations where you're reminding each other, just don't know. I hear what you're saying, and I kind of feel this, but we just don't know. We just don't know. We just don't know yet for another day. And also mirroring for each other the vibration that we're seeking to cultivate. How do you hold that conversation in good faith? How do you hold that conversation in trust? How do you hold that conversation in love? And if you can't get there, how do you hold it in respect? And if you can't get there, how do you hold it in disagreement without it turning into malice or something worse? Decentralization. That means we're no longer building pyramids of authority with the white guy on top, CEO. We're building distributed mandalas, round tables, the knights of the round table. What is required for you to take a seat at the knights of the round table? What is it? What is required? That you have a strong moral compass. Your integrity is your right to claim a chair at the table. Then you can discuss. Where there's a lack of humanity, we're being called for dignity. Where there's great division, we're called for diversity within unity. And where there's great suspicion and misinformation, we're being called for discernment. So I'm just presenting this as a small list to contemplate. It's not by any means an exhaustive list. It's an impressionistic list after kind of looking at the horizon, talking to people who know astrology. This is what's being called in. There can be more, there can be different ways of expressing it. But the thing that I just want to just emphasize one more time here is that moment of intimacy where you meet someone, either some point inside yourself, in a conversation with someone else, or on the grander scheme of the collective. It's that moment where you're on the verge of having an emotional reaction that could actually cloud your judgment or draw you into a particular band range or vibration of reality that's constructive, unconstructive. Many of us know about the Buddhist mindfulness practice offers us, that affords us this opportunity for the gap. This is where the gap is really important. And you hold that moment when you try to deepen your listening, and you try to shift your perspective from the collapse crisis mode to the opportunity mode. So that's one of the first themes that we're working on together in the module on mythology. Okay, any questions so far? Guys? Anything? Any reactions?
In my 500 years, this period of the dark night.
Yeah, okay, that's a great question. Doreen's just asked if this first 500 years is the dark night. Yeah, so I would say this is the dark night of the soul for the collective. How many of you actually feel like in your own personal journeys in the last 3-4 years since the pandemic that you have, on an individual basis, had what's called the dark night of the soul? The dark night of the soul, the dark night of the soul. What's the dark night of the soul? It's like where every sense of your identity, core identity, was either shooken or destroyed. So, I mean, identity is not a monolithic thing. It's tied to so many reinforcement contingencies. So your work life, your home life, your family life, your spiritual life, they're all reinforcements for this edifice that we call self. And we work really hard to try to maintain some sort of homeostasis so that this atomic structure is buoyed and can perform functions and duties. Not such a bad thing. I'm not into the verbiage of destroying the ego, as we'll see when we get to Jung. Your ego is absolutely necessary. It just needs to be a really flexible one. Your ego is like a container. It's what modulates your relationships. They're actually like a virtuous ego. I mean, the Dalai Lama has an ego. Geshe Tenzin Zopa has an ego. This 1960s idea of that what spiritual practice is designed to do is destroy your ego. What a destroyed ego looks like is schizophrenia, psychosis. We need better egos, compatible, reflective, discerning, able to negotiate, able to set boundaries, able to be fierce, able to recruit masculine and feminine qualities. All of that has to happen and only can happen in the ego. But how many of you actually felt along the last few years that every sense of solidity, every basis upon which you constructed your identity was shaken like an earthquake underneath you, tectonic plates shifting, or an absolute utter collapse? Did you have months of despair? Did you have, many people I worked with had physical catastrophes? Oh, by the way, it made me think that my buddy Chokade Piazza, he's on crutches right now, not crutches, on a cane. His back is out. So let's dedicate our merits, those of you that were on the pilgrimage, and Those of you familiar with my buddy Chaka Day will dedicate the merits that he can walk and gain back his health. But yes, you've had a health scare. You've lost somebody around you, pivotal, a parent or family member, spouse. You couldn't stand your job or lost your job. Your finances went all wonky. Your health gave out. Your relationships proved themselves to be incompatible after years and years and years. How many of you lost a friendship that was like 20-year friendship? Anybody lost a 20-year friendship? Can't believe it. You couldn't believe it. You thought to yourself, this would never happen. It's impossible. And then just like the great crossroad opened, the seas parted. And there you were, off on another trajectory. How many of you left home, found a new one? And it's not just like, you know, hi ho, I'm off to work we go. It's not it's not joyful. One of the characteristics of the dark night of the soul is that it's that moment where Jonah in the whale, the belly of the whale, God, you have forsaken me. I remember that. 25 years in Tibetan Buddhism, privileged to have found a Lama who has integrity, wonderful students, friends, family, enough resources to consider myself privileged in every way. And yet, days and days and days and weeks of utter disillusionment, unrecognizable to myself, completely lost about where I was going in the horizon. And to be perfectly transparent, lost my practice, lost even my faith. The last little bit, the last little stepping stone gives way. That's what's called the dark night of the soul. When there's no stepping stone left, you're swimming in the abyss. Your spouse can't help you, my dearly loved, my wife Emily. She couldn't get me. She couldn't reach me. If that's not already happened, that probably will happen now. That's happening, that dark night of the soul, Jung predicted, not only Jung, but all the astrologers predict, and especially the ancient Vedic astrologers, the reference that I use in my book, Sri Yukteswar, who's the guru of Paramahamsa Yogananda. The idea is, yes, you will lose everything. Yes, civilization, we will lose everything. But here's the blessing within the curse, is that's the only doorway to rebirth. It's the only one. If you get sneaky and you have something in your back pocket that you think you can rely on, one single tether, one single stepping stone, you're fooling yourself. Now, like, okay, then you bring up Geshe Zopa. Okay, I mean, he's an extreme example. But if you get him in an honest moment, he may say, yeah, I mean, as we did at the pre-pilgrimage when we were in Java. Matthew, would you say that he had a moment of doubt where he lost even that? Yeah, you would. We saw that. We witnessed that. Now, that's an unglamorized view of our Lama, that even he should have a moment where there was no place to stand. He said as much, that he was in utter darkness and confusion. Of course, because of his karmic virtue, it only lasted a few hours. Is it the departure? Yes, it's the crescendo moment of the departure. Let's call it that way. What I mean by that is that, okay, so Okay, let me say a few words about mythology because I have an assignment and I'm coming up on time. How many of you got to study any mythology in school? Oh, you actually cut, oh, more than half here. How many there? Well, you're fortunate ones. I don't know if they teach that much mythology, and I personally don't know if the new culture really cares about mythology. It's like, what's the point? Let's imagine that we have to provide ourselves with a rationale for reintroducing or reinvigorating our interest in mythology. Part of the archetype of where we are, let's say, at least for the past 400 years since the Age of Reason in Western Europe, what's called Enlightenment. The Enlightenment is a pendulum swing. Another way of saying it is the Enlightenment that happened in Western Europe that led to the scientific revolution was a reaction against too far extreme superstitious religiosity. It was actually necessary rebound from the burning of the stakes and the crusades and the witch hunts and basically the authoritarian control nonsense of the church that allowed to operate with impunity. What happens in the Age of Reason is that we understand that God is not at the center. It becomes human-centric. And the good part about the human-centric is it's not too far between, we understand our own creative prowess. We have a scientific explosion that advances culture in terms of medicine and mathematics and science and all the rest of it. And with that comes increase in lifespan and health and productivity. Huge quantum leaps forward as a result of the Age of Reason. But then there's also a shadow. And one of the shadows is now only becoming apparent to us in the last few decades, which is science on steroids without spirit can destroy the planet. And has. Science without spirit is capable of destroying the planet because it's amoral and aspiritual. It's all about the five senses, all about the mundane reality. It basically boils down to the fact that your brain jelly and electric activity and your heart rate, once they're done, you are a machine, and once you're done, once the batteries run out, the game is over for you. There is no such thing as consciousness. If there's no such thing as consciousness, there's no such thing as transtemporal responsibility. So we live in a disposable world where we can cut down trees and destroy the rivers and destroy each other. What's happening now is this is a period of recalibration where science can be in dialogue with spirit. But we lost our religion, we lost our spirituality, we lost our mythology, we lost our rite of passage. As the left brain becomes revered and predominant, we lost touch with nature, we lost touch with the divine feminine, we lost touch with receptivity, with listening, with energetics, with embodiment. I mean, I look at the AI, this new Pro Vision that came out. Have you guys seen the Pro Vision? Woo-hoo! Apple Pro Vision. I mean, it's here, folks. Jetsons is here. You get a choice. The choice is here. Do you want to go all virtual? You want to live in the Matrix? It has arrived. It has arrived. With Meta and Zuckerberg and Apple and Google, the choice is right there. You could leave your body and live completely in a digital matrix of someone else's design and get every jolly that you've ever wanted, every fix, dopamine fix that you've ever wanted, satiated, and you will sell your soul. Now, I'm not a Luddite. I think technology is important, but I think the purpose of our meetings is to reconnect with the soul and let the soul be the compass. Let the soul deal with the technology. Let the soul that has a moral compass be the designer of the technology of the future. Let it solve a problem for famine. Let it solve a problem for war. Let it solve a problem for disenfranchisement. Mythology is critical because we are storytellers. What I mean by that is those of you working with clients, somebody comes in on the first 6 sessions, and what you're receiving, unbeknownst to them usually and typically, is their mythology. What I mean by that is, though we don't study mythology, and though we have probably, most of us have a implicit assumption that it's irrelevant, we still live according to mythology. We still have stories. We have orienting stories. We have orienting stories because we are sense makers and linguistic. We're primates with language and big brains, with advanced time horizons and imaginations. And all of that needs structuring. We have to make sense of chaos. We have to order chaos. How do we order chaos? We tell stories. How do we live in a world that has time, past, present, and future? We tell stories. How do we deal with trauma? Well, we tell stories. Oftentimes we tell ourselves the worst story possible. You sit with a client in the first 6 weeks and you see just how bad and how confining and how disempowering and how victimizing their story is. And part of your job is to help show them that there are infinite horizons and that they aren't their story, and that whatever happened to them, but the way they're narrating their occurrences actually has tenfold or 100-fold more bearing on how they experience the world. What happens to us and how we tell a story about it, there couldn't be more a differentiating factor, more powerful differentiating factor. And look at our collective story. Well, we already started the hour or the session with adjectives that imbue our collective story. We're sitting back having a cup of tea and we're talking about the amount of trash in the sacred rivers of Bali. The fact that the villa construction and the development is unparalleled, out of control. We're telling a story. We're telling stories. We're constructing a shared story. And then I'm a little fear, and then you confirm my fear, and then we're sitting in fear, and then we're adding another little element to it. We're creating a mosaic. Oh, there's nowhere to run. You can't live in Bali. The United States is too expensive. It's a mess everywhere. It's too cold in Europe and there's no energy. Go to Canada. Oh my God, you've got Trudeau. We're constructing a story. We're living by way of a personal mythology within a matrix of a larger collective story. It's all mythology. And actually, even though we can't see it, it has a conclusion. Just sit down and listen to someone's story and they give you chapter 3. On the basis of chapter 3, do you know how the story ends? It's what's called a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you can, I mean, this is what therapists do if they're skilled within one session. You get the presenting information about someone's story. You look at the imprint, the childhood imprint, the ancestral, the transgenerational imprint. You determine how well they're processing that, and you can see where the outcome will go, right? If that's what we do as therapists, we're pattern recognition machines. We know where the story ends. It's not a very good story. It's a self-replicating story. Oh, I didn't get enough love, so I find partners that can't love me. Oh, I know I didn't get the reinforcement that I needed, and so I feel unworthy, and so I find myself in a dead-end job. Collective story. The collective stories are not so good either. They're imbued with their own victim narrative. This marginalized group of people has to rise up and destroy the authoritarian pyramid. Well, you're just reinforcing the victim part of the story, and you're making everything a fight of contention. Everything becomes contentious. What I'd like you to do, if you don't mind, if you're up for it, is find a myth. Start reading Return with the Elixir. Again, chuck it. If it doesn't resonate, start reading Joseph Campbell. The two PDFs are available. But also go find a myth. And maybe revisit a myth. I mean, if there was one that made a really strong impact on you in the last few years or when you were a kid reading in school, go revisit it or go find something new. My assumption, as I said at the top of the session, is that your intuition is the key driver of the journey, is the pilgrimage guide. Not me, not Geshe Tenzin Zopa, not Jironing. Your intuition will find the nutrients it needs to create a better narrative or story. Inevitably, one of the hallmarks of the story of the myth that you'll have is that life is hard. Your hero or heroine in the mythology has certain qualities or characteristics. They're naive at first. They live in a pleasure garden or a palace, or they can't see beyond their little bubble. They're in a shire. And there will be a disruption. A great disruption will happen. And the result of that disruption, there will be what's called a call to adventure. Are you going to go this way into the unknown, or are you going to double down and try to build up greater security even though there's nothing solid beneath you? These hallmarks of the hero's journey we will unpack together in the next 3 weeks. They're the classic trademark stepping stones in the 12-part chain trajectory of the mythology of Joseph Campbell. But for now, have a look at your own personal story. Become your own good therapist. You're either already beginning to transform your own personal narrative because you've been doing so much work on yourself, or you're just at the beginning. So become aware of your own story, the story you tell yourself about your origin. In the beginning, there was God, and God was the Word. How does your chapter start? But then go find a larger meta narrative or larger mega myth, one of the classics. Demeter and Persephone. I love Demeter and Persephone. So powerful. Persephone is raped by the Lord of the underworld. She's dragged asunder. The absolute worst possible fate befalls her. But she also becomes a queen of her own dominion. And this is the power of mythology. The power of mythology is about complementing the left brain of analytics, language, data, with stories, impressions, art, embodiment, sensation, dreams, visions, synchronicities, spirit, voices, intuitions, rituals, dance. That's all part of the mythopoetic way of being in life. What we're trying to do is we're trying to bring that back online, bring it into conversation, bring it into integration with our analytics side. Here in Bali, we go do Mulokad, we go to ceremony. And what ends up happening is you get sick. Something is released. Something needs processing. Something's asking you for your attention. Maybe memories come. Maybe dreams come. Maybe they're not all that exciting, and maybe they're all, not all that easy to interpret. Now you're on the journey. Now you're on the journey. It's not clear where the destination is. So we're going to share a mythology together. We're going to rewrite or reconstruct mythology together, and then you're going to rewrite your own personal mythology. But in the opening phases, just get to know what your present mythology is and try to find a piece of literature that, even if it's not perfect, don't look for perfect, just look for synchronistic. That's your assignment for the first week. I'll pause here. How are everybody doing? Any questions? I haven't been paying attention to the chat here. Sorry about that. Are these just comments? Any questions there? Any questions here? Here, there, and everywhere. Okay. Anybody? Nothing. I think we need more Balinese coffee on this side. I don't know about you guys online. Wait, Suzanne Jeffrey, you're in Rome. What the fuck? Good for you in Rome. Look at that. That's a trooper.
Like 3 o'clock.
Okay. No questions. Everybody needs a jolt of coffee. Oh, go ahead. Dude.
Talking about taking on that story, about like, I know when you like having like, it was like weird to realize that like I didn't have like illusions, like my perception is like a delusion, and what story about reality.
Yes.
I'm wondering about like, how do we know?
Yeah.
About like, which is
Yeah.
reality and which is story.
It's a great question. It's from Jen here. She's saying, it's the question about how do we know if it's real or not? Okay. And that's, I was trying to say we've now entered. Did the vax work? Did it not work? Should we have gone into lockdown? Should we have not gone into lockdown? What does the data say? What do the politicians say? Who's benefiting? You don't know. Is it possible both are true and both untrue? Is it possible that there's more than meets the eye? We don't know. And this is, Lynn Bell in this podcast, she said, there was a time in the 60s, those of you that remember it may have saw it, the Apollo mission where they got that first glimpse of the planet from space, from the point of view of space. And that image became like, captured the imagination because it was the first time that you could see humanity from an objective standpoint. And there was this sense of awe with that image. It characterized a whole generation. It captivated a whole generation. Now you have flat earth people who don't even believe that anybody landed on the moon. You have people that believe that the lunar landing was fabricated in LA in some studio. And why am I bringing that up? Because according to Lynn, this is the water we swim in now. This is not going to go away. This is actually going to become even more challenging. What's true? What's not true? Is it right? Was it a deep fake? Was it real? There's contradictory information. There's multiple perspectives. I mean, what it will require, and this is where that conversation, which you will find on the Wisdom Keeper podcast on the YouTube channel, Lynn Bell, is it will require an enormous tolerance for cognitive dissonance. So any of us that are really short on tolerance and that need to know, who can't stand ambiguity, and we're latched on to the left or latched on to the right narrative. It's definitely this, it's definitely that. Why do we do that? Partly because we have to know. We need a place to sit. We need a place to stand. We need to orient ourselves in time and space. But what the spiritual opportunity is, I say, what is being evoked or invited from the universes are not only our discernment, but in order to get discernment, you need tolerance for ambiguity. You need to be able to tolerate. See, this is the problem with science. It's like, oh, I can Google it and I know. I can Google it and I can know. I've got instant access to infinitesimal, infinite amounts of information. Now you go Google it, and now there's so much information. For every article that you read in one frame of reference, you can find it completely contradictory. And that will make us schizophrenic and crazy. So Jen's question is more about the personal, but it's the same answer. When you go on this journey and you're listening to intuition, how do I know if that my intuition coming to Bali was right or wrong? I sit with my friends over here and we catch me on one day. I'm like, oh, shit. Oh, sold my house, gave away all my possessions, got my kids out of collab school, left behind a good practice, 25 years network in New York, left all my friends, went to Bali, following the star, following intuition, following synchronicity. And then Jen, who just asked that question, is a guest in our house right now. She's only been in Bali 3-4 days. So she's looking at me like, what the fuck did you? Yeah, it's not clear. Some days it's clear. Who can tell you? Who can answer that question for you? Google, AI, the guru. This is part of the struggle of staying with the process. You're on a pilgrimage. You haven't arrived yet. You're in the woods. You're hacking away. You're following your intuition. Your intuition tells you to go right. You have a vision. You have a synchronicity. We don't know. We're just following it. It's part of the lab experiment. What we do know is that we have left behind intentionally the realm of always having to be safe, always having to be certain, always having to be right. Problem number one with all the social justice mumbo jumbo out there is that it's more important right now for people to be right than for us to find a real solution, a long-term solution for us to be together. There it is again. So I can't tell you, nobody can tell you, it may not be clear, but what you get, if you can stick with it, is that you will elongate the plastic sense of your nervous system, your soul plasticity, tolerance for ambiguity, because that's what the world will require of you for the remainder of your life. And look, it's only 2 weeks ago with my buddy Matthew here and Emily, Matthew, a filmmaker for Refuge, and also working on another documentary. Matthew had a lot of inspiration drawn from Matthew actually about it. Got a really beautiful compass. You know, Matthew's the kind of work, what you don't mind me saying, he's in an industry that is going to eventually be replaced by AI. You know what he says to me? I want to live in service. I want to live in service. That's trust. That's trust. He has a kid. He has a child. He's responsible. That is what it's like to live in trust, in faith, where you don't know where the pilgrimage is taking you, but you know where the industry was, and you know that you can't be there anymore, and you know you will be replaced, and there's an open vista ahead of you, and you're using your moral compass. I want to live in service. And round about that conversation, inspired by that human being, there has been a new sign for me on my trajectory. And all those moments of being lost and confused and concerned and anxious, well, we're resolved. It just took more than a year longer than I thought. And so the signs don't come when you want them. They come when you need them. And because the time frame between the dark night and the disillusion and the doubt and the existential angst and the emergence of the new sign, which the intuition resonates, says, yes, that is my direction. All of that time in the crucible is time in which you develop your qualities of tolerance, forbearance, patience, sensitivity, kindness, trust. They would come no other way than through the rite of passage.